Hey everybody, all of my friends in Fort Chip, the Chipperoos, how are you? And all my friends in Fort McMurray, the community track of Becoming a Community Builder Leadership Boot Camp, Becoming a Community Builder track, both the Fort McMurray and the Fort Chip group. How are you this afternoon? First of all, let me just apologize that we're only doing it once today. Only doing it once. We might bring it back to twice next coaching session. So we did it, last time we did it twice, one in the midday and one in the evening. This time we're doing it once, and then when I see you face to face next week in both Fort Chip and Fort McMurray, I'll ask you, how inconvenient was it for everybody not to have the evening? Because what happens is we start doing broadcasts at 9 a.m. and we finish at, 8 p.m.? Because there's 5 tracks, right, throughout the day. So it gets a little bit challenging. But we will do it if people will use the evening. But last time we did it, we didn't have too many people in the evening. So that's why we decided not to do it. So what are we doing? Coaching session, coaching session, coaching session. That's what we're doing. Margie's in the chat box, and Margie's here. Say hi, Margie.
Hello.
Margie is here to take your questions. So now, questions at RMWBleaders.ca. Agent of Change. That's the 3 weeks that we're in right now. Last week you got emails every day. Almost emails every day, except for the Easter holiday Monday. You got emails every day talking about how to expand your sphere of influence. So you might want to ask a question about that. Or you might want to ask a question about the surveys. Did you send out your survey? Right? Your 3 questions. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? Suggestions for my improvement. And if you could send me back to school, what class would you make me take? Ian, you're talking 463 miles an hour. That's because Margie went and got me a latte. But you know what? It has no flavor, has no fat, and it has no sugar. So Jeff, who's behind the glass, said it's a, what did you call it? Why bother latte? What's a why bother latte? All right, so did you just send out that survey? And what kind of feedback are you getting? So we'll talk about the survey. We'll talk about how to use it. We'll talk about communication styles and building trust. Trust. Building trust. So you can chat, and we're going to talk about some reactions to change as well. So you can chat in your question. You can email in your question. You could Facebook in your question. You could Twitter in your question. You can all kinds of thing in your questions. You could all kind of thing in your questions. Before we take questions, because I know we have some, before we take your questions, I want to make a comment. Trust. Trust. People are longing for leaders they can trust. And we gave you specific ways, real, tangible ways to build trust. The first real, tangible way I gave you was to listen. You were supposed to listen to people like they were going to die at midnight. Remember? Listen to people like they were going to die at midnight. And the purpose, the point, is there's no more powerful way to validate a human being than to listen to them and try to understand them. And when you understand them to their satisfaction, there's no more powerful way to validate them than that. One of you emailed me and said that you had been trying that, and that your conversations in negotiation and dialogue with counterparts and outside of your organization were stronger than they had ever been, and that they were better and more productive than they'd ever been. I'm paraphrasing now, but that's basically the gist of it. And I bet you I know why. Because our advice is brilliant? No, it's a truism. There's nothing more powerful than when I look at a human being, I listen and take in what they're saying to me, and they perceive that I understand them to their satisfaction. And they go like this, wow, you understand me. That's the first step in building trust. Listening. And we talked about the 4 communication styles: fact-based communicator, value-based communicator, emotion-based communicator, belief-based communicator. And we said in today's day and age, if we're smart, we'll adjust our communication style to meet theirs. I can't lead people today if I'm not willing to adjust my communication style to meet theirs. Now look, the Leadership History Survey gave you some insight into how you are. The Leadership Style Inventory, Leadership Style, hold on, I got to write this down. The Leadership Style Inventory, I want to make sure I mention that, gave you some insight into you. And now this communication. But all of this attempt to get you insight into you is really so you can then know how to adjust to meet others. It's not just so you can go, oh, look at me. Look at what I am. Isn't that great? Or doesn't that suck, what I am? I don't know, whatever. But it's not meant to do that. It's meant so you can push it out and then know how other people are and adjust accordingly. So the first step to building that trust, listening. But then, and I want you to hear this very, very closely. This is really important. Authenticity builds trust. Now, you can go to workshops nowadays about authenticity. Got to be your authentic self. Or you could just remember this. It's pretty simple. Trust comes. I trust another human being when they consistently and regularly do in their actions and their deeds what they claim to be. Alignment between their principle and their practice. Why do we all, or why not we all, but why do so many people go to Disney World if they live in Ontario or in the eastern Atlantic provinces? Or they go to Disneyland if they live out west? Why do they do that? Why do they spend all that money? Because it's expensive. Because it's authentic. And you can trust what you're going to get. You know, yeah, it's a pretty penny, but you know you can trust what you're going to get. Because it's authentic. And what's authenticity? That there is consistent. What I say I'm going to do, I do. What I claim to be, you see that in my actions on a daily basis. That's the next step in building trust. First I listen, then as that person gets to know me, I am what I claim to be, regularly and consistently. Because trust was the key to this agent of change. The agent of change understands, demonstrates, and exerts influence to act as a catalyst change. Influence through what, though? Trusting relationships. Not influence through intimidation, not influence through demagoguery. Jeff gave me the thumbs up on that. That was good. Demagoguery. Not through demagoguery, not through intimidation, not through barking, not through shouting, not through, behind the scenes stabbing people in the back, but through building trusting relationships that then I can act as a catalyst for change. That sequence is really important. I understand how to do it. I go build the trusting relationships, and then I can act as a catalyst for change. That 4 days of emails then gave you a specific strategy for doing so. A specific way of doing it. Hopefully you paid attention. Make your list. Build those relationships. Now, you might not have been able to do it in the last 10 days, but at some point you will do it. It's a very effective strategy. Finally, before we get into some questions that we had come in before, finally, this leadership style inventory. Now, I gave you the exercise. We did the exercise together. Remember? We did it quickly, but we did the exercise together. And you got a chance of, are you energizer, are you nurturer, are you researcher, are you organizer, whatever. But then I challenged you to go do it with your various stakeholder groups, whether it was in the company or organization you work, in your workplace, whether it was at your house, whether it was in a community-based organization, your place of faith, kids you work with, whatever. And to that end, I posted the video in the chat or in the learning portal. It's right there in the learning portal. If you look to the left, the tutorial of how to do it with another group is right there. And I gave you a little FAQ tip sheet of what you needed to do to make it work. Not the video, but how to make how to get the group together, what to think about, how to present it, da-da-da. Do the exercise with the people you work with, or with your family, or with your church or synagogue or mosque or place of faith. Do it. Why? Alignment and building trust. By doing the exercise, I get to understand somebody. As I get to understand somebody, I adjust my style to meet theirs, and I gain trust. And once I build those trusting relationships, I've now expanded my sphere of influence, I've built my capacity, and I can go get things done. Crazy. Crazy. Just crazy, isn't it? And how much does all that cost? Nothing! It costs you nothing! Do it! Do it. Now, so, after you've done it, and you're dialoguing it, I'm an energizer, I'm a researcher, da, da, da. Moving forward then, when you're sitting in meetings, you can say to each other, hey, remember, as I'm an organizer, so I like things to be X, Y, and Z, A, B, and C. Those friendly reminders that make everybody go, oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, now I understand. So once the group has done it, it can be an effective tool moving forward. Now, don't forget, these coaching sessions are really, really boring if you don't ask any questions, because I just ramble on, and they're a waste of time, frankly, if you don't ask a question. So questions at rmwbleaders.ca. Talk about agent of change. That was a small caffeine moment right there where I just kind of paused. Talk about agent of change, or we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. The survey. Let's unpack that a little bit. So the whole point of this survey was that it was a tangible way to build trust, proactively build trust. Remember the listen like they were going to die at midnight exercise that I asked you to do that first 7 days. That's an intangible. I'll build trust because I'll validate another human being by listening them and understanding them to their satisfaction. The tangible was sending out this survey. Now, what's the risk of sending out the survey? Well, of course, the risk of sending out the survey is somebody says something you don't like. Or the risk is people don't take it serious and they don't tell you the truth. Or the risk is they don't respond at all. Those are all risks. And all of those risks can make you feel bad. I feel bad because no one responded. Or I feel bad because they just gave trite responses. Or I feel bad because all they said was positive stuff and they didn't give me any feedback of what I could work on. I feel bad. I don't care how you feel, frankly. It's not about how you feel. It's about, are you getting tangible information that can help you grow? They say that feedback is the breakfast of champions. Now, frankly, I don't know if I came up with that or I stole that from somebody else. So if I stole that from somebody else, whoever you are out there, I'm giving you credit for saying it. You're the unknown speaker who said it, and I give you credit now, right? I give you credit now. That way it's not plagiarism. I don't know who you are, but I give you credit. Feedback being the breakfast of champions. What does that mean? That means is I get feedback. I get better. So shouldn't I proactively seek it out? You would think so. Now here's the other piece of that. When you get feedback and you internalize it and you take that feedback and you go do something with that feedback, the change continuum. What do you mean? Well, you get the feedback and you realize there's something you want to change, and so then you use the sequence of the change continuum to change. And you actually do. What do you think that person who gave you that feedback starts to think about you? Do you think they'd start to respect you more? You think they might even trust you more? Because you took feedback, actually did something with it, and actually changed, which is not what 90% of the population could do? Yeah. And you were the catalyst for that opportunity. You weren't reactively waiting for the opportunity. You were proactively creating the opportunity. That's a big deal. That's a really, really big deal. Because it is an opportunity for you to build trust as you expand your sphere of influence. How do you use the exercise? Well, first of all, let's be honest. Just because one person responds to your survey and says something, good or bad, doesn't make it true. Okay, let's just be clear. It doesn't make it true. So what am I looking for in the survey? The survey. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? Suggestions for my improvement. If you could send me back to school, what class would you make me take? What am I doing with the responses? I'm looking for trends. That's the simplicity. I'm looking for trends. If I see, well, let me back up for a second. I'm looking for trends. I take the totality of the information and I start to ask myself, is there any truth? Confidently, with strength, maybe nobody else in the room, but confidently and strength, I'm saying, all right, let me read this stuff. And then I'm trying to put myself in other people's shoes and ask myself, is there any validity to any of this? I'll use the example. Love the way love your enthusiasm every day. And then I see it again. Your energy for life. You're so excited all the time. Okay, I see it 3 times. Okay, that must be an asset. Other people perceive that to be an asset in me. It's a trend. I read it 3 times. If I read it once, might still be an asset, but maybe it's not manifesting itself consistently. Remember, where does authenticity come from? Where does trust come from? When I'm consistently and regularly what I say I am. Through my actions, not my words. My actions match up my words. So this is a good test, isn't it? It's a good test to see if I'm authentic, if I'm trustworthy. This is a good exercise. So I'm not just looking at the bad, I'm looking at the good to see what other people perceive to be my assets. What am I doing right? So when I read those assets and I look at the trend, is it what I thought? Is it what I wanted an asset to be? You're a great listener, 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 you're a great listener. Am I? I didn't know I was. That wasn't what I set out to be, but cool. Or what if you said this? One of my key pillars of my approach is going to be, I'm going to be a great listener. And you don't see that anywhere on any of the responses. Now, does that mean people perceive you not to be a great listener? Well, I can't guarantee that. But I can say this, it obviously wasn't in their top 3. Because they didn't mention it. What am I doing right? And they mentioned 3 other things. Here I am thinking one of my assets is I'm a great listener. And they didn't mention it. See, these are just flags that make me think a little deeper. I'm not going to be set off, good or bad, based on one commentary. So let's look at the negative one. I don't like using that word, but that's what we always think about question number 2. What am I doing wrong? Well, that's negative. Well, no, it's just gaining feedback. It's not good or bad, right or wrong. It's just gaining feedback. What am I doing wrong? Suggestions for my improvement. Again, I'm looking for trends. If I see the same thing, maybe said in 2 or 3 different ways, but if I see the same thing 3 or 4 different times, hello, maybe there is something to it. Maybe. What if I only see it once? Well, you still got to look at it. You just still got to look within yourself. And that's the funny thing about this feedback. I'm going to examine it. See if there is some reality to it. Either perceived or real. I'm not like that at all. Yeah, but you're giving off the impression that you are. See, that's the mature piece of this, where I have to take a walk around to the other side, and I have to look at myself from outside myself. They're helping me because they're giving me some thoughts, some perspective, some idea, But then I try to walk over to and see if what they're seeing is there's any validity. Oh, I can see why they might make that comment because sometimes I X, Y, and Z, A, B, and C. That's a very enlightened leader. Very enlightened. Now, someone might be saying right now, why does any of this matter? Because in today's day and age, we want our leaders to be authentic. This is a good check and balance. So when I get the what am I doing wrong suggestions for my improvement, I'm also listening to those suggestions. Now, look at how this thing builds sequentially. We just talked about the change continuum just a few days ago, a few weeks ago. If somebody points out a deficiency, you can then take that and say, I want to get better at it, and you push it through the change continuum. Am I willing? Go get some education, truly understand it, build a plan, have people hold me accountable, analyze the plan as we go through it to make sure it's still relevant and on track. The other end of that is this: I get better. This person who gave me the feedback watches that process and says, holy crap, this is finger puppet. Holy crap, I can trust this person. I might even let them lead me because they changed. And people never change nowadays. And you've built trust. That's how it should work. So to recap, I get the feedback. Somebody tells me I'm looking for trends. I look for the trend. What am I doing right? I see the trend. Is that what I thought I was doing right? Is that confirm and validate the things that I wanted to be great at, that people see it? Yes, it does. Awesome. No, it doesn't. I better look at that. Second question, what am I doing wrong? Suggestions for my improvement. I take that feedback, I look for the trend. If the trend is sound and I can see where they're coming from, then I know I need to change. How am I going to change? I'm going to push it through the change continuum. I'm going to push it through the change continuum. I'm going to sequence it out through the change continuum. Once I get better, two things are going to happen. I'm going to be better, woo! And I've built trust with my little finger puppet over here. Jose, my finger puppet, right? Hello, Jose. Who was that used to, the comedian that used to do that. But anyways, here I am, the finger puppet, and that person got better based on my feedback. Their self-esteem grows because they've helped another human being. And they know that you're authentic because you listen and you do based on people's feedback. Everybody wins. Last question. If you could send me back to school, what class would you make me take? What is the point of that, Ian? I didn't understand that one. It's a lighthearted way to really re-ask question number 2. What am I doing wrong? Suggestions for my improvement. So it's just basically saying in a whole different goofy way, what do you think I need to get better at? And you're looking for trends between 2 and 3 as well. If in 2 they say you need to become a better listener, my suggestion would be keep your mouth shut. And then in 3 they say, I think you should take a class on effective listening. Well, there you go. At least from that one person's perspective, you're not a very good listener. So that's a lighthearted way to ask basically the same question for confirmation. You ever gone online and you're filling out a form and they ask you to put in your email, right? And then right underneath it, what does it say? Confirm your email. But you're like, didn't I just put it in above? And then you try to cut and paste it in, it won't let you because you have to actually type it in, which I hate those little fields that make you do that. Well, this is that same. This is verifying the above. So you know it must be pretty strong if they say you need to improve on such and such, they give you some suggestions, and then the class that they think you should go back and take has to do with that same subject matter. That's a pretty sound confirmation. Pretty sound confirmation. That's the leadership, that's that personal performance survey. That personal performance survey. It's not just a tool to gain feedback. It's a tool to build trust. It's not just a tool to look introspectively. It's a tool that you can utilize to take outward action. I want you to look for a second. Let's stop the bus. I want you to look for a second over the last 5 weeks. First, we talked about a process for change. Then we gave you an exercise to look back and better understand who you are and what you are. Then we started to talk to you about your style as we talked about this agent of change. Now the purpose of that was so you better understood you, so you could better understand others. In addition, we talked about the way you communicate. And we talked about the different style of communication. And we talked about how you could use communication to build trust proactively. Then we gave you a very tangible way to expand your sphere of influence in your community or help people get on board with your agenda. And then we gave you finally another tangible way that you could ask people more personally and proactively build trust with them. We've given you a lot of information in frankly, a very short period of time. The question is, what are you doing with it? Now look, even in 15 weeks, it's hard to assimilate all this stuff. It's hard to take it all in. But the bottom line is, are you? Are you thinking it through? And many of you are, because you're sending me emails. Now, before we move on to reactions of change, now don't forget you can ask your questions. No one's asking any questions today. Last time we had all kinds of questions. Today we don't have any questions. So ask your questions. Questions at RMWB-leaders.ca. You can email them in. Margie's checking the emails. Or you can just put them in the chat box. But ask your questions. Now look, frankly, if I don't get any questions by 45 till, we're going to stop. Because why? Why should I continue to rattle on if we're not getting any questions? So you got to ask your questions. Now I do have one or two that came in. I think I have two here on my notes that were emailed in, and we'll make sure that we get to that. So it seems to me that this competency of an agent of change, the agent of change recognizes that they're not going to be able to intimidate change, they're not going to be able to autocratically deploy change, they're not going to be able to bark change. That the only way to get people on board today is build that trusting relationship. And they're willing to sacrifice a little bit of time for building that capacity. Because there's no doubt some of this stuff takes time. But they realize that the stronger that they can build those relational bonds, the more likely it will be that the change will actually happen and take hold and sustain. So change. Can you affect change? Well, one of the keys to affecting change is understanding people's reaction to change. Understanding people's reaction to change. And I think that there's 5 reactions to change. 5 reactions to change. And before I go through them, the purpose of this is not only looking at yourself, but looking at others. And it's the first question that I want you to start asking yourself before you go to implement change. How do I think people will react to change? How do I think people are going to freak out, not freak out, whatever? I think it's in our best interest before we have to implement a change to get a sense of how people react. Now, I think there's 5 reactions to change. Now, let me just say this. This isn't an attempt to pigeonhole people, because in our lives, at one time or another, we've probably been all of these reactions. In our lives, at one time or another, we've probably been each one of these things. It's more of an attempt to better understand how people might react. There's 5. First, what I call early risers. Now, these are people that like change. They frankly enjoy change, often for just change's sake. They just like to change. They like to change their hair color. They like to change their room. They rearrange the room. They like to go buy a new thing. They just like change. Change their style, change their whatever. They like change for just change's sake. They're what I call early risers. And they're relatively rare. Then you have the early adapters. Now, these people like change, except they want to know that there's a point to it. In other words, they're okay with change, but explain why. Now, here's the funny thing. You see it at the top of your handout from last time. Vision drives change. The why drives change. If you can't explain why you're changing to somebody, you can almost guarantee you're not going to get buy-in. You can almost guarantee that people aren't going to be on board. You can almost guarantee that people are going to do this. And you're going to get that attitudinal barrier. You can almost guarantee it. Almost guaranteed. So then, this person is okay with change, but they want to know why. Vision drives change. So you and I have to think of what we want it to be before we begin, so we can explain the why. If you can't explain the why, then don't try to change. You have a question for me, Margie?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
I'll stop what I'm saying for the question. That's how much I love you.
It's Trevor Shepard.
Yep.
Archie did a personality session similar to the leadership inventory and discovered what color personality they were. Instead of taking it to understand the different personalities they took it as the reason why people acted the way they do or explains their work ethic. Now the question, how can you make such an exercise more effective where the results are used for how they are intended?
Okay. First of all, I think that maybe we didn't hear that. Does she need to say that again? Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay, she's going to do that again. Little technical challenge.
Sorry about that.
Okay, just read the last part. I'll give the background. So the background of the question is this. Hey, we did a similar exercise, because they said they didn't do this exercise, they did a similar exercise, right?
Yes.
They did a similar exercise to the leadership style inventory that we all did. Similar exercise, and people may have not have taken it the way they was intended. So go ahead. Now read the question.
How can you make such an exercise more effective where the results are used for how they are intended?
Okay, so great question, Trevor. You're always my man. You're always got great questions. So first of all, I think you have to lay out the expectations. Notice that in this leadership style inventory, that first 5 paragraphs or whatever it is clearly articulates why it's important that we understand how other people operate. Clearly articulates the value of not only us understanding, but how it positively would impact the individual. So if you want people to gain from the exercise, you must explain to them why it's important to them, and not just another, my color is this, my color is that, I'm this kind of an animal, I'm that kind of an animal. Because most people in today's day and age have done these exercises and gone like this. That was fun, but why is it important? So you have to explain to them why it's important and what you hope to gain for them and why their situation will be better if we can use this exercise effectively. And then you might have to connect the dots, because it's not evident, Trevor. It's not obvious why this exercise will help me. So you have to literally explain that. Like I hoped that we did when we wrote that, and I hope that we did when we explained it. And that's why I said in that little FAQ that's on the right hand over there, the tips, you got to explain to people what the desired outcome is. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take this personality survey or this leadership inventory style survey. The reason we're going to do it is because we're all different in this room. We all have different talents, experience, and interests, which is good. But the challenge of that is that because of those differences, it can cause friction. Because of those differences, we can be more stressed. Because of those differences, we can sometimes lack alignment. And so this exercise is going to help us better understand ourselves, but also, and this is the caveat, but also our expectation is that you'll better understand one another and that we'll bend to other people. That's the expectation. Now, is saying that going to guarantee that people will get it? No, but it increases the likelihood. Second of all, to make the exercise more effective, you got to dialogue it out. You got to talk about what the learning was. What did I gain? I gained that I'm a this and that and a that and this. Woo! Oh, no. I want you to tell me what you gained when you heard that so-and-so and such was a certain way. So you got to debrief the conversation. And then you got to bring it down to tangible meaning. okay, if Trevor's an energizer and Ian's an organizer, what could be some of the potential challenges of that here in our workplace? Or where could we point to times where that has been a problem? Now, I will give you this. It does take an enlightened group to be able to have that conversation. There's no doubt. So, step number 1, clarify the expectation to ensure that they get it, that they understand why you're doing it and what you hope the result to be. Step number 2, to ensure that those outcomes are met, have a dialogue and bring that dialogue back to real and tangible examples of how the lack of understanding of each other's style has caused problems and how the understanding of each other's styles has enhanced or improved the situation. When you make it real like that, they go, oh, there is something in this for me. My situation or my experience could be better. As soon as people understand why you're doing it and how the doing of it will make their situation better, they're more likely to buy in. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but when we talk about being a catalyst for responsibility, we'll talk about how to gain buy-in, and one of the keys is what's in it for me. When you can explain to somebody what's in it for them. And then finally, the final thing that I think you can do to ensure that it has greater impact than perhaps you had is that you make it clear that there's not really a choice in this. Now, we're not going to go in depth about it, but we will actually, starting next week, we are going to talk a little bit about performance management and how do you manage another person's performance. But sometimes you've got to say to people, here's why we're doing it, here's how we're doing it, here's the process we're going to follow, and here's what we expect will come out of it. And then that's it. We're not, yeah, but what if they give me attitudinal barrier? Well, then obviously they don't trust the process. See, because that's really, Trevor, what it boils down to. If people think it's trite, if people think it's silly, if people think it's dumb, if people think it's nonsense, then of course they're not going to buy in. But that might be a manifestation of some other things that they've done that have been silly, that have been dumb, that have been goofy, and that didn't result in anything. Now, how do we shift that? We shift it by clearly explaining the expectations, by walking them through the process, and explaining what we hope to achieve. And then, by having that dialogue after and bringing it down to tangible examples of how it could benefit us. When, now that we understand this more about each other, when were there times that this caused us problems and when were there times that it actually helped us? That gives you a fighting chance at least to make it a worthy and valuable exercise. Because I think that's what your question really was, don't you think, guys? How do I make this a valuable and worthy exercise? So hopefully that gave you some insight into how I would do it to make it a little bit more valuable. All right, you got any more questions for me? Okay, we'll get back to the change things, but I did have a question that had come in, and it isn't exactly the same, but it is similar in this sense. How do I set up doing the leadership style inventory with a group that might not be excited about it? Well, I gave you some tips. Right up there on the right-hand side. I think it says Leadership Style Inventory Activity Tips. I know we're very creative in our naming. And if you open that up, that PDF, it'll give you some keys. But I think the first key is you being able to explain to people why we're going to take the next hour of our busy lives and do it. So, to Trevor and to this questioner, it's really understanding for you what your desired outcome from the activity is and being able to explain that. Now, what's interesting is that's the same thing we learn in here about what drives change. Vision drives change. The early riser is going to buy off on change no matter what. The early adapter, if you can explain to them why, they're going to buy off on change. So, to the questioner and to Trevor, the better that I can explain what we hope to gain, the more likely it is for them to buy in. Didn't guarantee buy-in now, listen. I didn't guarantee it. I just said more likely. So I wanted to get to that question because that person had sent them in before. And don't forget, you can always send in your questions beforehand. Beforehand. So that I have them and I can read them and I can think about them and I can give you a thoughtful answer. That doesn't mean I can't answer off the cuff. I'm always happy to do that. It makes this interaction a lot more fun for me because I'm not just talking at you. Okay, reactions to change. Number 3, the crowd. Now, I also refer to them as sheeple. Now, that's not being disparaging or derogatory. That just means that in this specific instance, that they're indifferent. Well, that's fine. Whatever. I don't care. We can go right. We can go left. It's all right to me. And they usually go right or left based on whatever pull is strongest within the group. If the group is pulling negative, they'll go negative. If the group is pulling positive to the change, they'll go positive. They are the crowd, better known as sheeple. Sheeple. Sheep, people, sheeple. They're not bad. Just in this specific instance, they're indifferent. They'll go either way. 4th, the legitimizer. Found within the crowd, often amongst the slowest to be convinced naturally. They are people with 2 important characteristics. First, they will carefully evaluate new ideas because they are independent thinkers who need to make up their minds for themselves. Secondly, they are known and respected by the crowd. Once their minds are made up, it can help others to reach their decisions. That's why they're called legitimizers. I would also call them people of influence, right? They have influence over the crowd. They say or do what the crowd wishes they could say or do, or wants to say or do but is afraid to. They're the people at the end of the meeting. You know, at the end of the meeting, you've been there, where we're all looking at our watches going, okay, come on, we're almost done. Please, let's just wrap up. And then the presenter or the leader of the meeting says, all right, are there any more questions? And all of us go like this, please, God, no more questions, please, no more questions, please. And then you have one person that raises their hand, and we all go, ugh. That one person that just raised their hand, probably a legitimizer. Because they're thoughtful, and they ask a question, because they really want an answer. And they're just not going to be a sheep led to the slaughter. They want to find out what's really going on. Now, here's what's funny about them. They can sometimes come off being a resistor, but they're not a resistor. Not at all. They care deeply. If I was going to implement change in a group, I'm looking for the legitimizers. Not just the early risers and the early adapters. I'm looking for the legitimizers because I know if I can get them on board, then once they're on board, they're on board. Finally, the resistor. They're against. Why are they against? I have no idea why they're against. They might be against because they're just angry at life because their kid just went into rehab. Or they're angry at life because they just got divorced. Or they're resistant because 7 different times they were told things were going to get better and they didn't. And now you're the 8th time. And they're like, you know what, man, I don't have the energy to do this again. Get all excited that things are going to get better and then they don't. So before you judge the resistor, you have to really think through. Have you been like that before? Now, here's another thing about the resistor. It's completely unrealistic to think 100% of the stakeholders will be on board. That is completely unrealistic. Don't think that way. Completely unrealistic. Let's look at it by percentage. Early risers, early adapters, and the crowd make up 60% of the group. They're going to be on board just by giving them a simple explanation of why you're doing it. Yes, it will take some time with the legitimizer, but if you can explain the why, and you're authentic, you do what you say you're going to do, and you've built trust with them, you're probably going to get them on board as well. The resistor, it's unrealistic to think they were going to be on board anyways. 5 reactions to change. You know what this tells me? This tells me I can change things. Now, not today, but when we get into systems, we won't cover it in class, but next 3 weeks, I'm going to give you a ton of information. And one of those, I'll give you a system for implementing change in a group. I'll give you a system for implementing change in a group. But the first step in that system is going to be to do a quick evaluation of how I think people are going to react to that change. how do I think people are going to react to that change? It's important that we're thoughtful. Agents of change understand how to change things, how to change themselves, and how to change their surroundings. We've already talked about the change continuum, how to change yourself. And now we're starting that discussion of how to change things around me. Here's the funny thing. Agents of change understand it's our moral obligation to master the power of change. Remember in the handout, progress and change are indelibly intertwined. There can be no progress without change. Progress and change are indelibly intertwined. There can be no progress without change. But how am I going to change things? Am I going to intimidate it? Am I going to backstab it? Am I going to tell stories? Am I going to gossip? Am I going to do all that? Am I going to ramrod it? No. I'm going to do it by building trusting relationships. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to listen, both tangibly and intangibly. How am I going to do that? I'm going to understand how I communicate and how other people communicate. I'm going to adjust my style to meet theirs. How am I going to do that? I'm going to make sure that I understand my style and the style of others and adjust mine to meet theirs. How am I going to do that? I'm going to regularly send out surveys about my own performance so that people know that I'm always gathering feedback and I'm trying to get better. And then I do get better and they're impressed. How am I going to do that? I'm going to understand the key components to changing. Now there's nothing that I just said, that cost $1 million. Nothing that I just said cost $1 million. Everything that I just said is doable within your skill set. In other words, you don't need to be Einstein to pull it off. You don't need to have some skills that only 3% of the population has. If there was something that would set you apart, that would be unlike the majority of the population, you know what it would be? Desire. Do you have the desire to change the ways you're doing it now without the thought of success? See, I can't guarantee you that you'll do all this stuff and have immediate success. That would be irresponsible on my part. I think you will. I've seen it myself personally. I've seen it others, but I can't guarantee you. So are you willing to make changes when you can't guarantee success? Are you willing to send out that survey even though you can't guarantee what you'll get back? Are you willing to listen to people like they're going to die at midnight even though you can't guarantee that they'll even notice? Are you willing to take the aspects of that survey and actually work on it, even though you can't guarantee that anybody will care? So what does it really boil down to? The differentiating factor is desire. What kind of a person or a leader are you going to be? I think the kind of leader we're talking about is what the times require, but I can't guarantee it. And frankly, to Trevor and everybody else, I can't guarantee that people will understand. I can't guarantee that they won't look at that exercise and laugh you out of the room. So what's the key then? The key is the consistency. Because trust comes from authenticity, and authenticity comes from consistently being a certain way, consistently doing certain things, consistently living out your principles and showing them in your practices. Consistently and regularly. That's what builds authenticity. And then that's what builds trust. And then that gives you the capacity to exert influence that will lead to change. Does that make sense? Okay, last call for questions, otherwise we're going to shut it down. So if you got a question, put it in the chat box now. And you guys always wait to the last 10 minutes to put in questions. But if you got a question, put it in the chat box right now. I'm going to give you a minute and a half to ask a question. So you got a minute and a half to ask a question. If there are no questions, then we're just going to have a nice day, right? That's fair, isn't it, Jeff? That's fair. So if you got a question, email it in. If you don't have a question, if you got a question, email it in or put it in the chat box. Give you a minute and a half. All right, here's the drill. Next week, we're going to do two things. We're going to start the next competency. The next competency. Big picture, holistic, systems thinker. And it's a doozy, man. It is a doozy. And it's good. It's really good. I love it. It's one of my, I don't want to say it's my favorite, because otherwise the other ones get jealous of my little competencies. They like sit around the dinner table and they look at me and they're like, which one do you like best? Which one do you like best? So I don't want to make them get jealous, but it is one of my favorites. It is one of my favorites. Planning is the step head. What do they call it? The redhead stepchild. But this one I really love. And here's the other one. Guess what? Time to make your commitment. Woo! Yeah. So after next week, when I'm in Fort Chip and we're sitting eating that good old food that we always have, or I'm there with you at Keanu College in Fort McMurray, after that, I'm going to send you a link and you got to start making your commitments. What are we going to get better at? And why now? Well, think about it. Think about it. We look within ourselves and we ask others to give us feedback, and we should be able to make a commitment now of what we want to get better at. Right at the wire. See, a legitimizer. I was thinking, no more questions, and then boom, a question. Go, Margie.
How can you create trusting relationships where the team is segregated or working in silos? How would you break those down?
Okay, so we got a team that is segregated, working in silos. So obviously a lack of trust or a lack of the understanding that we need to work together. So the first thing I do, and we've talked about this all last week, the first thing I do is identify the people of influence in each one of the silos. Whether I agree with them or not, whether I like them or not, doesn't matter. I identify the key people of influence in each one of the silos. Then I color code them. Ian, this sounds exactly what you told us to do. That's right. I identify the key people in those silos. Key people of influence. Maybe not the people with the titles, the key people of influence in each one of those silos. I then am going to work first by identifying how they view what I want to do, or view us, or view whatever. View me, view what we want to do. Red, yellow, green. Remember red, yellow, green? Red, totally against, or yellow, they're indifferent. Green, they're on board, but they're not a champion. And then I'm going to go have those 100 cups of coffee. Now, practically speaking, what does that look like? That means I go and set up a meeting with them. I want to better understand what's going on in your silo and how we can support you. I want to better understand how our silo can make your silo more effective, more efficient, and more enjoyable. What can we do to serve you? So what does that mean? I go and listen. Yeah, but they're never going to have a meeting with me. If I go to them and say, I'd like to learn more about what you do in your silo or your group, and I want to better understand, well, why are you doing that? Because we're all working in silos, and I figured instead of walking around telling everybody we're working in silos, I would just go and talk to people and better understand in an attempt to bring us all close together. And I'm just here to serve you. I don't have all the answers. I don't necessarily know what to do, but I know the better I understand you, the better we can serve you, and maybe that would help. That's the attitude. Maybe not the words, but that's the attitude you go with. And then what do? Then you listen. Remember, we listen like they're going to die at midnight. You understand their needs, their wants, their desires, their hopes, their aspirations. And you make notes. And here's another thing you can do. Send that survey. Huh? What? Yeah, send that survey. How do we do with you? Are we any good? You're in your silo over there. We're in our silo over here. And I'm going to assume this is within an organization, which means there is a symbiotic relationship. There is a connection. So how are we doing with you? That's that icebreaker. So whether you go meet with them individually, a person of influence, or you ask them collectively to give you feedback, what are you doing? You're coming in low and humble and saying, how can we help you? That's the first step to building trust. And as long as you're authentic and sincere about that, and we've already defined authenticity, excuse me, this is the third one in 3 hours, right? As long as you're authentic and sincere, over a period of time, people will see that. Now, what am I attempting to do? I'm attempting to work with that person of influence to build a deeper relationship. As I do that, that relationship will draw our two silos closer and closer together. You can also utilize the information that we just talked about. Who's the legitimizer in that group that I can build a bridge with and then build a bridge with, and build a bridge with, and build a bridge with. And then I'm the catalyst. That's why the agent of change is a catalyst. They don't do it all exclusively on their own. They're just a catalyst to making it happen. So to answer your question very specifically, you've got these silos. People aren't working together. Step number 1, identify the people of influence. Step number 2, color code them. Step number 3, work to build a trusting relationship with them through a 100-cup of coffee strategy where I'm listening. In addition to that, listening to try to deeply understand them. In addition to that, I could tangibly send them a survey about how they perceive us. But the number one thing of all of that, the purpose of all of that is for them to know that we authentically and sincerely want to help them be their best. That will never work, Ian. It works all the time. In cities and municipalities and governments and businesses, all over. But the key is, you got to really mean it. And you got to go in low. And does it take time? Yes. You think that if it took, what do they say? If it's 10 kilometers in on the hike, it's 10 kilometers out on the hike. So if we have fractured relationships and a lack of trust amongst all these silos, you think you're going to be able to walk in and shoot some silver bullet and everybody gets along? No, you're not. However, I will say, once this foundation is built and you start doing what I've just described regularly, gaining the feedback, changing accordingly, gaining the feedback, changing accordingly, how can we help you, how can we serve you, listening, you'll start to at some point see exponential improvement in the relationships. Because people all of a sudden will go, wow, that silo wants to make us better. They're not coming to us with hat in hand asking us for stuff. They want to make us better. And they're going to move quickly to align with that, especially when they find out that consistently and regularly you do what you say you're going to do. Final thought on this. You might want to ask, when you have that conversation, why don't we work together regularly? Why do you think these silos are here? Have we offended you in any way? Have we done anything to violate the trust between us? Have we done anything to crack and fracture trust? You might want to ask those questions too. Remember we called them courageous conversations? You might have to want to have those courageous conversations. All right. So hopefully that answered your question. Margie, we got any more? All right. Tuesday. If you're in Fort Chip, I'll see you on Tuesday there at Keanu College in Fort Chippewa. And if you're in Fort McMurray, I'll see you on Wednesday also at Keanu College, and we'll be in the Elements Room. And don't forget, if you're in Fort McMurray, don't sit with people you know. Mix it all up. Final. If you're in Fort McMurray, unfortunately not in Fort Chip, tonight at Patty McSquiggin's, I can never pronounce that, there's an event. As all of you know, we're taking a group of LBC or Leadership Bootcamp graduates from last time, and we're going to Ghana. We're taking a playground that was donated to us by the regional municipality, an old playground that we have now refurbished, and we're going to Ghana. And we're going to give that playground to a school, the Anawase School in the Volta region of Ghana. And there's 25 former participants of Leadership Bootcamp that are going, along with a bunch of other people. And they're going to build this playground, they're going to build walls of the school, and they're going to do all that. Well, tonight there's a big fundraiser at Patty McSquiggin's, and they're doing a 50-50 draw, and they got live music, and they're auctioning off both men and women. They're auctioning off firefighters and cops and all kinds of other people. Chefs, they're auctioning off chefs. Like the guy from the Sawridge is donating a dinner for 8 if you buy him, which is really, really cool. So it's going to be a fun time. I think it starts at 6:30 or something like that. Just go down there because all of the proceeds, 100% of the proceeds, go to helping this project, and all the people from the Leadership Bootcamp 1 go to Ghana. Okay? Fort Chip, I'll see you Tuesday night. Fort McMurray, I'll see you Wednesday night. Have a great weekend. Take care, everybody.